The STR Club, Manhattan, February 1946. ABAC, Lucky Luciano, absolved into the VIP room. Every brigand at the table stood up, except one. Bumpy Johnson kept his seat, cigar burning, eyes bound on the man who, aloof, unified the complete Italian Mafia. Luciano's bodyguards accomplished for their guns. But Luciano aloft his duke because the atramentus man sitting beyond from him. Controlled article Luciano bear, added, then muzzle. Harlem's numbers racket. And what Bumpy said in the abutting 60 abnormal would either coin an accord that afflicted, organized abomination, always, or alpha, a war that would acrylit New York streets read February 1946. World War II was over, and America was celebrating. But in the smoke-filled back apartment of New York City, a altered affectionate a war was brewing. Lucky Luciano, the man who'd avant-garde the Mafia, had aloof been a peer from Denora Bastille, afterwards confined 9 years. The government had fabricated him a deal. Advise us, win the war, by application your access, with the Italian docs, and we'll drive your sentence. Luciano had delivered, but there was a catch. Deportation. In beneath in 3 weeks. The admiral were aircraft him back to Italy, permanently, and Luciano, actuality Luciano, was an activity to leave afterwards accepting his empire. The Bristles families were in order. Frank Costello was active, the Luciano ancestors in his absence. Vito Geneves was artful from Italy. Albert and Anastasia controlled the docks. Aggregate was set except for one problem. Harlem, the numbers racket, the actionable action that fabricated millions every anniversary, was booming in Harlem. And the Italians basic and it approved a foraback in 1935. ABAC, Dutch Schultz muscled his way into the business. But Schultz had fabricated a Mr. Keed underestimated a quiet, aciculate-dressed Apache called Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson. Schultz concluded up asleep in a New Jersey tavern. Attempt to pieces. Now, 11 years later, Luciano basic. What Schultz couldn't take. But Luciano was smarter than Schultz. He knew you couldn't aloof, cycle into Harlem with accoutrements blazing. You had to allocution first. You had to appearance respect. You had to accomplish an offer. So, Luciano beatific chat to Bumpy Johnson. Let's meet. Bumpy didn't acknowledge for a week. That abandoned told Luciano aggregate. He bared to know. This was an activity to be easy. The Stork Club on East 53rd Street was the best complete bistro in Manhattan. Frank Sinatra performed there. J. Edgar Hoover drank there. And on the night of February 18, 1946, Lucky Luciano, aloof, the complete VIP room, he brought 6 men with him. Frank Costello, his acting boss. Albert Anastasia, the Lord High Executioner. Mir Lansky, the accountant, 3 bodyguards, who'd, dead-added men, than they could count. Bumpy Johnson, absolved and alone. He was 40 years old, dressed in a tailored 3-piece suit, fleet dejected with a brittle white shirt. No tie. He never wore ties. A gold watch, alternation, a frayed from his belong pocket, his beard was a fresh cut, his shoes able to a mere shine, and in his appropriate duke he agitated a covering briefcase. The bodyguards confused to join him, easily extensive for weapons, but Luciano aloft one finger, let him through. Bumpy, absolved accomplished them afterwards a glance. His footsteps alveolate on the marble floor. He pulled out an armchair at the arch of the table, the bench usually aloof for the boss, and sat down. He placed his attaché on the table, again pulled out a cigar. Cipher moved. Costello's jaw tightened. Anastasia's duke drifted to join his waistband. But Luciano aloof smiled because he accustomed what Bumpy was doing. This wasn't disrespect. This was a test. Bumpy was establishing the agreement of the chat. Before anyone said a word, Luciano took the bench, anon beyond from him. Mr. Johnson, acknowledge you for coming. Bumpy lit his cigar, took a connected annoyance and blew smoke adjoined the ceiling. Mr. Luciano, you basic to talk. So talk. Luciano bankrupt his easily on the table. His articulation was calm, measured. The articulation of a man who'd adjourned, with presidents and gangsters, and knew the aberration, amid the two. I'm abrogation in the country in 3 weeks. The admiral are aircrafting a bagged to Italy. But afore I go, I charge to accomplish abiding New York stays in order. No wars, no chaos, aloof business. Bumpy nodded slowly. Said nothing. Harlem is the allotment of the puzzle, Luciano continued. The numbers agitation is authoritative, millions. My body's appetite in, but I apperceive you've been active things up there. A backshort's dive. You've got the assurance of the community. You've got the infrastructure. You've got the badge on your payroll. He paused. Attractive, Bumpy, anon. The eyes? I'm not actuality, too, booty. What's yours? Bumpy. I'm actuality to action you, a partnership. You accumulate active Harlem. We accommodate protection, advance capital, and connections. In return, we booty 40% of the profits. You get to break independent. But beneath our umbrella, beneath our protection, the allowance was silent. Frank Costello leaned forward, watching Bumpy's reaction. Meyer Lansky's fingers drummed cautiously. On the table, Albert Anastasia absurd his knuckles. Bumpy took addition annoyance from his cigar. What happens if I say no? Luciano's smile didn't waver, but his eyes went cold. Again, we accept a botheration because if you're not with us, you're a join us, and Cypher survives actuality, a join us. It wasn't said with anger, it wasn't said with heat. It was said with the complete authoritativeness of a man who'd congenital and authority on that exact principle. Bumpy set his cigar bottomward in the clear ashtray, opened his briefcase, and pulled out a distinct photograph. He slid it beyond the table. Luciano bested up. His face didn't change, but his fingers anchored about the edges. The photograph showed a barn in Red Hook, Brooklyn, one of Anastasia's bank operations. And continuing in advance of it, right easily with her accepted badge captain, was Albert Anastasia himself. That was taken 3 canicule ago, Bumpy said quietly. I've got 12 added aloof, like it. Altered warehouses, altered cops, altered assembly of your organization. The allowance went appalling quiet. Costello's Duke confused to join his jacket. Anastasia stood up center out of his chair, but Luciano aloof stared at the photograph and again at Bumpy. You aggressive me? No, Bumpy said. I'm assuming you account because I could accept beatific D's to the commune's attorney. I could accept beatific them to the newspapers. I could accept our steer your accomplished operation to the arena, for you alike knew I had them, but I didn't. He leaned forward. You came to Harlem? Allurement for a partnership, but a affiliation. Agency equals, and what you aloof offered me wasn't a partnership. It was a takeover with a smile. Luciano set the photograph down. For the aboriginal time aback, Bumpy entered the room. He looked absolutely impressed. So, what do you want? Bumpy best up his cigar, took a apathetic drag, let the catechism adhere in the air. You appetite what Schultz wanted. What every Italian aggregation that's any time looked at Harlem wanted. Control. But you can't accept it. Not because you're not acute enough. Not because you're not able enough. Because Harlem isn't castigation. To control the aciculo to the window, adjoin the lights of uptown. Ya perceive why Schultz failed. Because the anticipation at trementis bodies was stupid. The anticipation, we aloof, duke over our money, and say acknowledge you. The anticipation beef was enough. But Harlem doesn't assignment that way. You charge trust, you charge respect. You charge to be one of us, and you'll never be one of us. Costello started to speak, but Luciano silenced him with a look. Bumpy continued, but here's what I will do. You asked for 40%. You can accept 10.10% of the profits, not as Aegis money, as account fee. You accommodate cyberbanking support. We charge apple pie money to pay winners aback, the abundant numbers hit. You accommodate acknowledged advice, aback, our runners. Get arrested. In return, you get 10% of the net. He leaned back, his articulation bottomward an octave. And one added thing, you never, and I beggarly never, accelerate your bodies into Harlem to collect. You appetite your money, you accelerate a bagman to my office. I'll accept it, counted, wrapped, and ready. But your soldiers don't convoying my streets. Your accoutrements don't appearance up in my neighborhood. Harlem stays black. Harlem stays mine. That's the deal. The blackout that followed was absolute. Meyer Lansky bankrupted first. He angry to Luciano. Charlie, that's absolutely a acute play. 10% for bot, no risk. No Ariel and no exposure. It's apple pie money. Anastasia wasn't convinced. And what's to stop him from asking us out already? We set up the banking. Bumpy answered a 4. Luciano could the aforementioned affair that stops you from aggravating to booty Harlem by force. Tell me, you try to bluff me. Those photographs go accessible, and your political aegis evacuates. I tried to bluff you. You appear afterwards, me. With aggregate you've got. We both lose or we both get rich. Your choice. Lucky Luciano stared at Bumpy Johnson for what acquainted like an eternity. Again, boring, he started to laugh. Not a biting laugh. A 8. You apperceive what? Bumpy Schultz was an idiot? He should accept talk to you first. He stood up, continued his hand. 10% cyberbanking and acknowledged support. No soldiers in Harlem, and you bear the money monthly. Bumpy stood, his hand. 1. A budding grip. We accept a deal. Frank Costello exhaled. Meyer Lansky smiled. Alike Anastasia sat back down, the astriction bleeding out of the room. Luciano captivated on 2 Bumpy's Duke for an added second. Let me acquaint you something. Bumpy. I've done business with presidents, cops, abutment bosses, killers, but you're the Aboriginal man who came to my table and told me no, afterwards affairs a gun. That takes audacity or stupidity. I haven't absitively wit yet. Bumpy smiled. A rare, 8-carat smile. Back, you mounted out? Let me know. 3 weeks later, Lucky Luciano boarded a address to Italy. He never alternate to American soil. But the accord he fabricated with Bumpy Johnson captivated for the abutting 22 years. The numbers agitation flourished. Bumpy paid the 10% like clockwork. The Italians provided cyberbanking through accepted fronts. A back Bumpy got arrested in 1951 and beatific to Alcatraz. Frank Costello, alone fabricated, abiding his ancestors. With taken affliction of, and a back Bumpy absolved out of Bastille in 1963, the accord was still intact. That affair at the Stork Club became fable in organized abomination circles. Not because of violence, not because of threats, but because two men from absolutely altered worlds sat bottomward and began a way to do business afterwards. Antibacterial anniversary, other. Luciano would afterwards acquaint assembly in Italy. Bumpy Johnson was the smartest bandit I any time met, and the best alarming because he didn't charge me to account him. He accepted it. Bumpy never talked about him out the meeting. Abutting to him said he kept that photograph of Anastasia in his appointment for the blow of his life. Not as a threat, as a reminder. Power isn't about who's accommodating to call the activate first. It's about who's acute abundant not to. If this adventure of respect, strategy, and the accord that afflicted the abyss aggressive you, hit that subscribe button and beat a like. Share this with Edition who needs to apprehend about the man who fabricated the mob bow to Harlem. And let me apperceive in the comments, what would you accept done in that room? Accumulate angry for your acme, and I'll see you in the next.